Your screen isn't broken. This train isn't backwards. It's a cab forward. And despite its polarizing looks, there's a method to their madness. Regardless of whether you love it or hate it, there are some like me who have actually come around to this design just from how ingenious the concept is. So how does that play out in this three-rail form? Today, we're going to look at this example of Southern Pacific's most famous AC-12 in its Lionel LionMaster format and see if it's any good. True to form, we're going to look at some history first and explore the reason for these locomotives' odd appearance. While a few other railroads dabbled with this design to put the crew in front of the steam engine, the Southern Pacific claimed the largest roster of these cab forwards, and that was mostly out of necessity. With their trackage utilizing long tunnels in the Sierra Nevadas, traditional steam locomotives weren't ideal to use. Smoke from the front of the engine will get trapped in the tunnel, and the first place it goes is, you guessed it, in the cab right at the back. So to make life a little easier on their crews, they flipped the design. Put the crew up front and the smoke flying out the other side, and all is well. It also made for fantastic visibility for the engineer, though some of the controls were a little bit backwards. Things may be turned around, but there's still a need for fueling this thing, and this still has a tender behind the locomotive. Due to that location, all cab-forward locomotives are oil burning, as it's much easier to deliver fuel through piping than trying to figure out how to load coal from the back all the way to the firebox at the front. But not only was this massive 4882 articulated behemoth the largest of the cab-forward type designs, this one, number 4294, was the last one built. These AC-12 articulated engines were built in the mid-1940s and were phased out in favor of diesel power in the late 50s. Diesels are kind of a cab forward now that I think of it. Thankfully, this example isn't just here on our rails, but 4294 has been preserved at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. It's a fantastic representation of steam ingenuity, and I'm so glad one of these has been preserved. Now then, this example running on these O-gauge tracks is from Lionel. It's now part of their LionMaster line, which means it's been designed to tackle tight turns while still looking big and impressive. Lionel made a few runs of these in different catalogs, but they all share the same basic design. Measuring in at 27 inches long, this 4882 articulated design has a lit cab at the front with two painted crew members, a few details behind them, a sliding vent over the cab roof, great detailing along the sides of the boiler, and all the fixins for the wheels. That's probably one of my favorite details since, unlike other designs Lionel has done in semi-scale, they don't appear to have omitted anything. If you've ever seen a LionMaster Challenger or Big Boy, you'll notice they left out part of the running gear with that little nub there. But the cab forward appears to have retained all of its splendor for the wheels, including prototypical stars painted in the center of each driver. That's another cool detail. Speaking of details, all of the equipment on the smoke box looks neat, and the builder's plate really makes this fit right in with other scale locomotives that might be in your collection. That's one of the hallmarks I tend to leave out when I'm mentioning LionMaster. They do more than just go around tight corners. These will fit nicely in with your 1/48 scale size locomotives too. On the platform at the back, there's some handrails that I always thought were bent, but apparently this is how they are on the real ones too. If your version is an older TMCC version, this is where your wireless tether would be to connect to the oil tender. But on this Lionchief version, we get a plug. It seems strong enough, but it can be a little finicky to get into place sometimes. Be careful not to bend the contacts by not lining them up right, as this will cause issues with the sound going to the tender. Ask me how I know. Speaking of the tender, there's more surprising details here. Aside from nice lighting on the back and crisp rivets all around, there are opening hatches on top for fuel. And in case you were wondering, even though this is a LionMaster, this version can still top off the water and oil. You won't be able to access this feature with a Lionchief controller, but these engines are essentially legacy engines. So if you use a Cab 1L, Cab 2, or Cab 3 app, you can get those to work. The sounds here are nice, and even though there's only one speaker in the tender, it still throws some sound. This one is newer, so the sound quality is a little more polished than the older TMCC version. The whistle always seems to be loud and proud, even going on longer than I've held the button many times. I don't really know why it does that, but it's fun. There's a bell with a nice taper, generic crew talk, but it's not Mr. Lionel, so I can't complain there. It's just kind of a nice sound set.
Dispatcher, my train's made up. Am I clear? Over. Cleared onto the main. Out.
There's also your usual generic banter that you get on all the legacy engines. It sounds great once it's moving, but it only has enough chuffs for one set of wheels. No out-of-sync chuffing for all you rivet counters out there. It still sounds good, and I usually don't get hung up on things like that. The control here is buttery smooth, and it glides effortlessly regardless of how much you have it pulling. The sounds do start to seem a bit frantic for the chuff once it gets going fast enough, but I get yelled at for running trains fast anyways. I will note, though, that although this is a LionMaster engine designed to go around tighter turns, that mine tends to have a little bit of trouble. It's designed to go around curves as tight as 031, but I've had issues derailing mine with the front pilot wheels. I wonder if something needs adjusting for the spring that keeps them down, or if it's just this section of track that shifts from an 084 right-hand turn directly into an 048 left-hand turnaround with no transition. Seems like it makes them want to jump the track. However, the cab forward keeps going until the switches on the other side catch the derailed wheels, and it trips the Power Master and cuts the power to the whole layout. It's probably happened to me 7 or 8 times by now, and it took me a few to figure out what's happening. But as you can see, it doesn't do it here on camera, of course. Speaking of tighter turns, that's another thing you'll want to keep in mind if you add one of these to your roster. On most of my articulated engines, the front wheels move ahead of the smoke box and boiler, but the cab at the back tends to hang out a little bit. Or a lot, if you have a big badonkadonk boy. This cab forward is rigid the whole way through, so the cab does tend to hang out over the side of the rails. You'll want to take clearances into consideration if you run one of these. It's something I kept in mind when I was adding my T1 duplex to the roster with its fixed front end, but the cab forward certainly has more noticeable overhang than that one. Of the releases Lionel has made with the LionMaster lineup, this one never got any legacy releases. It was only released late in the TMCC days of 2007, and then this recent Lionchief Plus 2.0 version in the 2020 Volume 2 catalog. I was worried that the cab forward was the last of the LionMasters, especially after I had heard that they didn't sell very well. But thankfully, there's more to come, and it's my hope that this great lineup continues. I've put a lot of work collecting and reviewing as many LionMaster engines as I can because I really love that these engines, like the cab forward, can bring big steam power to little layouts like ours. My son just loves watching these go around, and the cab forward, while certainly an interesting design, is unique enough to capture his imagination. It's neat explaining to him why it's different from our other engines and telling its story. Maybe someday we'll visit the West Coast and see the real one. Well, that about does it for the cab forward. It's a great engine to run, and I must admit, I might like this quirky design more now that there is one here to enjoy at home. They really did a wonderful job with it. I just got to figure out that transition, but oh well. Thanks for watching. On screen you'll see a link to all of our reviews, so check those out if you want to see more. Plus, it would really help us out if you could subscribe and hit that bell. That way you'll know when we've got something new, and it kind of helps YouTube know that we don't suck. So it helps everybody out. It's a pleasure sharing these with you, so thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.